70s and early 80s, when the working class in Britain was so powerful. We have suffered decades of defeat since the miners' strike, and we face the contradiction between the most left-wing leadership in Labour's history and the low ebb of class struggle. And therein, and this is getting back to the point, lies the danger of this anti-Semitism witch hunt. It matters for so many reasons. It is used to undermine the best leader we've ever had, a diversion from the fight against the Tories. It is used, of course, to silence criticism of the State of Israel and advocacy for Palestinian rights, and it closes down discussion, as we have seen on so many key historical issues. It separates anti-Semitism from all other forms of racism and obscures the racism against black and Asians, which structurally excludes them from power in society and within our party. Yeah. Anti-Semitism itself. It is odious the way false allegations of anti-Semitism are being used for factional interest. And if we don't put an end to this, it will come back to haunt us. But there's another consequence too, comrades, and that is the undermining, the dividing of the rank and file movement necessary to sustain a left-wing Labour government. To concede to this witch hunt is to abandon the radical grassroots movement to the power of the parliamentary party, and to give up in advance the chance of a lifetime of a radical Labour government. So our challenge, and I'll conclude on this, is to learn from our comrades here tonight. You have had the courage to speak truth to power. Our meeting is entitled, Let's Talk About Palestine. We shall do so. We shall not be silenced. This is about our fight in the Labour Party for a movement to sustain a Corbyn government. But it is more than that. It is about supporting the just struggle of the Palestinians and putting right a grave historical wrong. But it is even more than that. We are all part of an interconnected global struggle against an establishment and elite that axis of evil, bringing the world hurtling to destruction. We have to fight back, speak truth, challenge power, because the future of our world may depend on it.
About Zionism, that at the meeting 2 years ago, from the chair, I refused to say that JVL was an anti-Zionist organisation for two reasons. One, because Zionism means different things to different people. Two of our most prominent members, I won't name them, say I will not call myself an anti-Zionist. I am a Zionist, but I agree with you on all your views on Palestinians. It may not be consistent and logical, but that's what they feel. And the second reason, the one is the definition, which isn't consistent. The second one is that people change their minds in their lives. I was telling one of our speakers, it took me time to learn, move on the question of what is Zionism. It didn't come initially. So, having said that, if anyone feels uncomfortable, you're very welcome here if you have a slightly different view. And now I'm going to ask Ilan Pappe to speak. He will tell you about himself, but he is one of the brave Israeli Jewish historians who has worked out what it's about.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here, to see so many people defying terrorism in Brighton.
Yeah.
I read in the Jewish Chronicle, which I don't read on a regular basis, but I read on Friday that one of the reasons this meeting should not take place is because of my own presence. And because I said, so it quotes, that Zionism is more dangerous than Islamic militancy. Of course, I never said it, but that never bothered the Jewish Chronicle. Yeah. But what is interesting, I wanted to find the quote. And the quote is from 2007, when I gave an interview to the Washington Post. These was the years when Islamophobia was very strong in the United States. And in an answer to a question about Islam in the Middle East, I said, to my mind, Zionism is more dangerous to the safety of the Middle East than the religion of Islam. Of course, for the Jewish Chronicle, Islam and Islamic militancy is the same. And I think that's part of the issue that is not highlighted in the present false allegation of institutional anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. Many of these people are trying to divert our attention from the one religious minority in this country that faces abuse on a daily basis, and which is really under a danger of institutional policies that can really hurt them in every walk of life. And we, as Jews and non-Jews who are part of this organization, should never forget that this is our priority, despite the fact that people are trying to prioritize for us a different kind of a racist kind of table. We are gathering as a Jewish voice for Labour because at least most of us would like to say that we are Jews and not Zionists. It is important for us. It is important for me as an Israeli citizen not to put the Israeli flag on the Day of Independence because the flag symbolizes oppression, colonization, racism. I cannot identify with the flag of a state that oppresses another people. And the flag of Palestine for me is the flag of justice, and I proudly wave it. We are Jews and not Zionists because we know history. And we know that the Balfour Declaration was granted by one of the biggest anti-Semites ever living in this country. A person who in 1905 passed a resolution in the House of Commons to prevent Jews who were running away from pogroms in Eastern Europe to come to a safe place in Britain. He gave the Balfour Declaration in order to divert Jewish immigration from Britain to Palestine. And because we know that truth, we cannot identify with that kind of ideology and that kind of support. We also know that Jewish tradition has in it famous and marvelous chapters of Jews in the name of Judaism who fight against apartheid in South Africa, against Pinochet in Chile, against racism in the south of the United States, and therefore, under the same principle, in the name of the same legacy, they can only be against Zionism and the Israeli policies towards the Palestinians. And if someone calls them racist or anti-Semite, they should say that they are proud anti-colonialists, anti-racist Jews, and do not back up just because someone is using these false allegations against us. We also speak as people in this country who know exactly the role that Britain played in the catastrophe in Palestine. We know that it was Britain that allowed Zionism, the settler colonial movement of Zionism, to have a foothold in Palestine. Without the British bayonets, the whole catastrophe of Palestine would have been avoided. We know that in the 1920s, when for the first time Zionist organizations bought land in several parts of Palestine, and the land was still owned by tenants it was the British authorities in mandatory Palestine that brought the police to evict by force peasants and farmers who lived on those lands for hundreds of years in order to make a place for new Jewish colonies in their stead. And we know enough about the history to know that British soldiers stood by when they were supposed to be responsible for law and order, when Zionist forces ethnically cleansed tens of thousands of people from the towns and cities of Palestine in April and May 1948. We know all this, and because of that, we are meeting here today to say not only to the Labour Party, but also to the British government, you have never come to terms with your role in the catastrophe of the Palestinians, and it's high time you will do it instead of celebrating the Balfour Declaration. We are also here because in the name of Judaism, there is not one day that has passed since the beginning of the Zionist project in Palestine that Palestinians were not under the boot of oppression, colonization, ethnic cleansing, and apartheid. We know very well that in particular, during the 1948 Nakba, in the years of military rule inside Israel, and since the occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, every day passes by in which the basic human and civil rights of the Palestinians are violated. And the more we are moving towards our period, we are more and more surprised that not more people are objecting, because with the passage of time, more information flowed. It's much easier to know what's happening on the ground. People are seeing with their own eyes the occurrences on the ground, and yet it seems as if in Westminster and in Whitehall, people are either deaf or blind, and they don't want to hear, they don't want to see, and they continue to support Zionism and the State of Israel unconditionally without paying attention to the human catastrophe that Zionism brought to Palestine since 1948 until today. It is particularly depressing when you read the reports of the British Council and the British Consulate and the British Embassy, which are open, those you can access, since the 1970s. Especially, I don't know if you know that, but the British Council was particularly interested in what goes on in Area C. And their reports are the best you can find for the measure that Israel exercises in an area of the West Bank where there is a political consensus in Israel that that area, 60% of the West Bank, should be annexed to Israel. So they want the area without the Palestinians living in there. So they are using the settlers as vigilantes to terrorize the people. They're using the army in order to declare parts of Area C as military training ground. And according to the Israeli law, you cannot live in an area which is designated as a military training ground. And any piece of land that the Israelis claim that the Palestinians are not cultivating becomes a government land and is immediately transferred to the Palestinians. Now, why do the Palestinians cannot cultivate Area C? Because they are not allowed to get to the land to cultivate it. Now, this callous, cynical abuse is happening every day in Area C. And every minute that the British media wastes on alleged institutional anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, every minute that they waste is a minute that they should have used to report to the people what is being done to the Palestinians in Area C and everywhere else in Palestine. Whether inside or outside the EU, Britain is part of Europe, and this Europe has been silent since 2006, when Israel began to enact a genocidal policy towards the people of the Gaza Strip. Not one European member of parliament of any significance or member of government has voiced any kind of outcry against the crime against humanity that Israel inflicts on the people of Palestine. So we have a role also as Europeans, regardless of the Brexit debate. We are part of a political entity that is beyond the EU, which is part of the Western world that has not dealt properly, never has dealt properly with the Holocaust, with its own policies of anti-Semitism in Europe, and threw it all on the Palestinians. It's time for us to open the debate on our anti-Semitism, not to be afraid of it, but within the right context, within the context that says you do not solve racism and anti-Semitism in Europe by allowing a Jewish state to be racist in the Middle East. Finally, I think we have to be very worried about the attention to politics in Israel in the election, and I know Haneen will talk about it more, in 2015 and 2019. Yes, there is a possibility, I don't know if it will happen or not, that the Netanyahu era would come to an end. It's possible. It's not unthinkable. But we have to think about the alternative. We are familiar with that alternative. We used to call it liberal Zionism or left Zionism. This is gone anyway. They are calling it something else now, blue-white. God knows what it means. But it's an alternative. Its main ideological stance is that it doesn't like Netanyahu. Neither do I. But that's not enough as a vision for the future. But they are in a position to mesmerize the Western public opinion once more, especially the Labour Party, especially the Blairites on the Labour Party. They love generals like Benjamin Gantz, who is a war criminal, who enacted acts of crimes against the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, and the other three generals that are in this party, which might be the new government of Israel. This is exactly the kind of charade that we will all now face. Israel is back to be a social democracy. There is a reasonable mainstream Israeli political party taking over from the awful Mr. Netanyahu. These people are not different from Netanyahu when it comes to the Palestinians. And this is the main issue. They are only better in camouflaging the crimes on the ground. And the Labour Party, and especially you in the Labour Party, will have even a more important role to expose, as we needed to expose when the Israeli Labour was in power, when the double talk was at its height. It's very important to expose and to contextualize the Zionist project and not to be blinded by the fact that there are tactical changes within the Zionist establishment and leadership. Let me finish by saying what I said in the beginning. I think it's very, very important. And I understand that not everybody wants to define themselves as anti-Zionist, or they do. But I do think that if you do define yourself as an anti-Zionist, you can be a proud person. You are a person that opposes colonialism, you oppose racism, you oppose anti-Semitism. You are facing an ideology that really contradicts everything you believe in as a universal, humanist, socialist person who is a member of the Labour Party. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are incredibly lucky tonight because after those two excellent speakers, we now have Haneen Zoabi. I've been spending some time with her today, and she's the sharpest brain and the most remarkable woman, and she looks at things strategically while I look at things emotionally and pragmatically. So I welcome her very much to speak to us now.
very much. You speak English with an English accent, I will speak English with an Arabic accent. I'm very excited to be here, not just because you support the Palestinian people, but because you reflect a trait which I respect very much, which is courage. Because I think that without courage, ethics and ethical values are meaningless. Without courage, freedom is meaningless. Without courage, critical thinking and thinking by itself is an impossible. And we are in a period which, to recognize the simplest injustice in the world, needs us to be courage. And I want to thank the Jewish Voice of Labor. I would thank every one of you, and I would thank Ilan Pappe, although he made me feel unnecessary here. I thought, so what should I talk more? But I will start by saying that within I will try to answer some basic questions regarding the micro levels of the macro of Israel as a colonialist state. And I'm supposed to be a citizen. I am not in Gaza. I don't live within a siege. I am not in the occupied territory. I don't see army in my everyday life. I have an Israeli citizenship. I was a member in the Knesset. I should reflect the brightest side of Israel. We, the 1.5 million Palestinians within Israel, whom Israel didn't expel in 1948, whom Israel has expelled 85% of our people, should at least enjoy some level of democracy. We should, and this is what Israel do. Israel uses us as a citizen to prove that occupationism is something which it is something to protect Israel. It is now something against Hamas. It is now something against the Palestinians as a terrorist. Well, we are not Hamas, and of course, Hamas is part of the Palestinian people, and I am part of the Palestinian people. And the fact that I am here is an indication that Zionism, although its success, it doesn't reflect a complete success. The fact that I am here speaking about my people, about defining myself as a Palestinian, as part of the Palestinian people, and not making the Israeli citizenship an obstacle to my connection to my people, and refusing to treat this citizenship as a taming strategy, as a strategy of control, which it is. Citizenship in Israel is not a strategy of empowering us, of giving us our rights. It is a bargaining that you, the Palestinian, should disconnect yourself from your people, from your history, from your collective memory, and we will give you some civil rights. So Israel didn't succeed. Israel didn't succeed within 70 years to tame us, to say, well, 15%, which I didn't expel in 1948, I can manage them. I can treat them as an internal issue. No, we are not an internal issue. And no, Israel cannot say that the Palestinian the Palestinian issue started from 1967. Also the refugees, and also us, 20% of the Israeli society, is an indication, a proof that we cannot start from 1967. It is not enough to start to speak about Gaza and to speak about the refugees and to speak about the West Bank. We should speak about what is happening within the state of Israel, within this democracy. Within this democracy. Are we enjoying a special relation? Are we enjoying a recognition as a collective group? So we are also a proof that the colonization is not a project which is conducted, which is executed yes, just within the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Before speaking about citizenship, I must say a few words about, so I will speak about the micro level within this macro level of colonization. Israel is not a static situation, doesn't reflect a static situation. Something happening in Israel. Israel is shifting. It is not just a colonial state. It is also shifting from a racist state to a semi-fascist state. We should speak about 85 laws which Israel has passed in the Knesset, which prevent us from owning houses, which there is a law which make the state obliged to build an exclusive Jewish settlements inside the state of Israel. Settlements is not a project which began in 1967 or a notion or a concept which Israel is implementing inside Gaza, inside the West Bank. Settlements are an ongoing project. Nakba is an ongoing project also within the state of Israel. So it is not these terrorists in the West Bank. We don't throw stones. We engaged ourselves in a political struggle. We cannot claim that we are terrorists. You cannot claim that we are threatening Israel. We are citizens, has no tools except the parliament, a political struggle, and of course identifying with our people. So let's take a look how Israel treats us. But before that, we must say something about the election. We have 1 week ago. The right wing has the right coalition from 120 seats, 55 seats. Gantz, as Ilan Pappe say, a general, he's not an alternative. When Netanyahu spoke about annexation, just 2 hours after, Gantz say, yes, we support annexation. He didn't criticize Likud. This the alternative inside Israel. He never criticized Likud. They criticized Netanyahu not because his military power or his political rule, because of corruption, because an internal Israeli matter. So, annexation and talking about the security of Israel, not the rights of the Palestinians, is a consensus inside Israel. It is not the right wing. And whenever we meet European parliamentarians, they say that we must encourage the peace camp within Israel. Okay, you are talking about confiscation, you are talking about colonialism, they don't repeat this word. You are talking about racist laws and undemocracy, but there is a peace camp, there is a peace coalition which we can keep talking with it, and hopefully something will change within Israel. No, we must analyze the Israeli society, and we must recognize that the annexation of sea, it is not enough not enough to take 78% of Palestine. Now it's a consensus inside Israel. Also those who voted for merits, 12% who voted for merits, the extremists in the left side within these Zionist parties, 12% support annexation, and 34% from the center, the liberal center, 34% support annexation. So we cannot talk about two camps inside Israel. We can talk just about a very rigid consensus. And the consensus in Israel now is shifting, as I said, from managing this crisis towards solving the crisis, to solve the crisis. And now Israel and the right wing think that it is the right moment, to finish the issue. Why? And this is the difference between them. The liberal Zionist wants to put facts in the ground without and negotiate, maybe more negotiating, and the fascist right wing want to finish everything. And we must realize that using Trump and using the right wing in Europe and using this shift of the Israeli society more and more towards the right wing. If Lieberman was in the margins of Israel in 2003, now Lieberman is a minister and was a minister. And there is a shifting elites within the Israeli society. 3% of the generals in the Israeli army in 2003 were settlers and right-wing. 3% from the generals. Now 27% from the Israeli army are settlers and right-wing. Something happening inside this colonial state. Something more and more racist and semi-fascist happening. And this is because it started, and this is not because Israel was a democracy, and now, as some European diplomatics said, now this is worse. The problem is to Netanyahu. We can get rid from Netanyahu, and then things will be easier. No, it is the DNA of Israel. Maximum land with minimum Palestinians. I am a citizen. Israel has confiscated, not just expanded the settlers 3 times more since Oslo in the West Bank. Israel has confiscated 85% of the land of the citizens, of the land of the Palestinians inside 48. We are 20%. We live above 2.3% of the land. 2.3%. And we are 20%. And we owned in 1948, we owned most of the land, about 76% of the land, or Ilan Pappe, historian, can correct me. So it is not a discrimination. No, it is not a discrimination. It is to perceive the Palestinian citizens as an obstacle to Jewish state. Because the meaning of a Jewish state is an exclusive rights for the Jewish inside Israel. Forget about occupation. Even if we don't have the problem of occupation, and we don't talk about this, we don't talk about there is in every single aspect of life, housing, land, education. We cannot study in our school the Palestinian history. We cannot study our poems and our poetry. Mahmoud Darwish we cannot study. Ghassan Kanafani we cannot study. There is loyalty law that every cultural production should be loyal, even culture should be loyal to the value of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. So it is not just an oppressive strategy, citizenship. And of course, I cannot even recognize myself or define myself as a Palestinian. Haneen in the West Bank and Haneen in Gaza and Haneen in Jerusalem, she can't define itself as a Palestinian. But Haneen in Nazareth and in Haifa and in Lid and al-Fahim, I must define myself as an Arab Israeli. Something which even this is to rewrite my identity. There is a more violent symbolic aspect toward the 1.5 million which Israel didn't expel. It's to rewrite our history. It is to rename the landscape, to rename the cities, and to rename, so to create an alienation between me and my homeland. I didn't think that the apartheid in South Africa tried this strategy of alienation. So I cannot recognize that this is my homeland, and this is what we study in our schools. In the first and second and third and fourth grade, I studied that this is the homeland of the Jewish. This is what I studied. And this is where we begin, some of us asking themselves, okay, this is the homeland of the Jewish, who I am and what I am doing there. And you pay taxes in order to learn how inferior you are, and that you are a guest here, and you should be thankful to Israel that she's accepting you. She didn't expel you. You are here, and she can in some way deal with you. So this mechanism of alienation, of rewriting history, rewriting geography, of course by distorting history, is the way Israel, beside physical discrimination, beside controlling the land, beside 56% are under poverty line. The average income of the Palestinian family is 1/3 of the average income of the Israeli family. Although Israel is so strong, and she succeeded after Oslo. Oslo turned to be a strategy, again, of expanding settlements, of just giving legitimacy to Israel. What is Oslo now? It's to give a more convenient environment for Israel to say, okay, I am making negotiation. This is the discourse till a few years ago. I am making negotiation. So any vitur, any concession, every concession from the side of Palestinians, Israel knew how to use it as also a tool of control. But this was not enough. And this is what we must realize during the last 10 years. Something happened. What happened is that the settlers and the settlements and this, not the occupied territory, this land which every Israeli feels that this is part of Israel now, has shifted towards the center of the decision-making politics inside Israel. As I said, shifting of elites from the liberal Zionist who cares also about colonization and also about the lands, but also about liberal discourse. Gantz and Tzipi Livni cares about liberal discourse. They used to care about this legitimacy, to feel part of Europe, to feel part of the Western values. Now, the right wing doesn't care. They don't care. In the contrary, they make two very important steps. the first to declare annexation of Zone C. It's a declaration. It's the end of the story. In Israel, the psychology is the end of the story. That's it. That's it. With Trump, with the unfinished Arab Spring, with the right wing in Europe, with the attacks against Jeremy Corbyn. It's the feeling that there is no recognition of the Palestinian rights. Now there is no recognition of a Palestinian question. There is no question. We solve everything. Refugees and the procedures of Trump against UNRWA, Gaza, siege, and security coordination, and annexation of Zone C. But what about the apartheid? What about this claim of the apartheid? And there is the solution. It's the law which the Knesset has passed 2 years ago. Israel as a nation, as a nation state for the Jewish people. How this is a solution? This is a solution by this analysis. They invoke within this notion the term of the Jewish self-determination. And they give this notion priority upon democracy. So now the value, before 2009, before Netanyahu, Israel claims a balance between the Jewish side of the state and the democratic side of the state. Okay? And we said, as citizens, that this is a contrary, but I will talk about this in the last 2 minutes as a vision. You cannot be. Now, the right wing thinks that, yes, it cannot be. Because democracy prevents the state from the annexation of Zone C. Because if democracy is the most important value, they cannot. They will create a kind of apartheid. So they have changed basic law. The definition of the state has been changed 2 years ago and no one talked about it. From Israel as a Jewish and democracy to Israel as this is the name, the state of the nation, the Jewish nation. So there is no claim about democracy. So we can annex Zone C, and we can give some cantons, or to annex the whole area. And Zone C is 60% of the West Bank. Nothing left to the Palestinians. So by invoking this value of self-determination and drop the pretendence of democracy, you no longer need the question of demography. The demography of the Palestinians is not a problem. Because this is what the liberal Zionists talk about, demography, the disengagement with the Palestinians because of the security and because of the democratic image, never because of the right of the Palestinians. The word, the expression, the right of the Palestinians doesn't exist in the Israeli political discourse. You cannot hear it. It is all about even those who want this engagement, even those who want two-state. Before Barak, the Liberal Party said no partner for peace. And before Herzog, the head of the Zionist camp, the new name of the Labour Party, said it is not the time for two states. Even before that, no one, the peace camp, which the European Parliament, the official Europe, talks about, the peace camp never talked about the rights of the Palestinians, nor Oslo was a paradigm for the rights of the Palestinians or a paradigm for justice. It was a security interest of Israel. And you cannot accumulate a justice perception starting from the point the security of the Palestinians. So if democracy, if the claim of Israel was, and democracy was the tool of Israel in 1948 to be accepted as a legitimate member in the UN, now Israel doesn't need these claims. They don't need it. And if they have solved the demographic issue in 1948 by ethnic cleansing, now they are solving the issue of demography by the apartheid law. Classical apartheid law. It is not an analysis. It is not, you don't need anyone to analyze here. You need Ilan Pappe, of course. You don't, you can just have this law. Israel, and there is an Article 7. It is an obligation of the state to build an exclusive settlements of the Jews inside Israel. And Article 1, for the first time, Israel doesn't speak about the Jews inside Israel, but that it is a state for the Jews in all over the world. For the first time, this official and artificial distance between Zionism and the State of Israel has been deleted at all with this law. So just to have to translate Israel as a nation state, which doesn't mention the word democracy, nor equality, and they changed the recognition of the Arabic language. The Arabic language was an official language before this law, and now it is no more an official language. Thus, Hebrew is an official language. So it is not just a colonial state. It is a dynamic towards more semi-fascist state. And why is this? Because Zionism, any colonial project has a natural tendency to grow. And Israel is growing. Israel is becoming more and more. They didn't come in order to protect themselves from the ghettos and the antisemitism, but they are creating for themselves, the Israelis, a ghetto. They are creating, they are so isolated, they didn't come to coexist with me. You came to replace me, and it's obvious. And the law of making al-adhan, the voice of al-adhan, להנמיך את הקול של המואדן, make it...
decrease the voice of the muazzin.
For muazzin, and what Netanyahu said, also in Europe they prevent also in Europe they prevent al-adhan. In Europe, but this is Europe. You are here within an Arab and a Muslim region. You came. Why you decide to come to the Middle East if you have no recognition, nor to the language, nor to the culture, and you wanted to be part of Europe? But you were in Europe. And you came to me with this superiority towards my culture and my language. You just like my land, so you steal my land. So in order to finish, just 2 minutes about the vision. 1 minute about the vision. Okay, yes. So it is, although are we optimistic or pessimistic? I don't believe in such concept, to be pessimistic or optimistic. And maybe we are an indication, the Palestinian citizens. Israel thought, after not just expelling 85% of the Palestinian people, expelling the upper class and the middle class, and those who can struggle for their national liberation, and it kept the weakest 15% of the Palestinian society. I am the 4th or the 5th generation from the peasants whom Israel didn't expel in 1948. But now I am coming and talking in an absurdic way about the need of the Palestinian people to think in an unifying and strategic way, not about borders of 67, and not just about discrimination, about decolonization. It is the right, we should talk with the right paradigm and with the right vision, and it is the right moment. It is the right moment. When it is so easy, when Israel so frankly saying, I am establishing an apartheid by law. This was not the case before 2 years ago. We have a law for apartheid, so this is the time to say, so it is not just an analysis. It is Israel has no constitution. It is the most basic law of the state. To talk about decolonization, justice, democracy, and decolonization. And this is not just my right as a Palestinian. It's also the Jews' rights inside Israel to live within a normal state, to live within a normal situation. Why they are supposed to be part of a colonialism? We don't liberate ourselves. We also liberate the Jews within Israel. Thank you.
Because this isn't politics, is it now? Can you hear me, folks?
Right. Those of you who have been at JVL meetings before will know what's coming next. These meetings cost a lot of money to run, thousands. And there are hundreds of people here, and so we need your help to pay for these meetings so that we can continue the work of JVL. So I'm going to say, people know what I'm going to say next is, who's feeling very rich today? Who's going to want to shame their colleagues by giving me £50, which will encourage all the others to contribute what they can afford? Because there are some rich people here, I'm sure. So who can afford to make a start to encourage everybody else? And I have here, indeed, it's always true, a great comrade who's not giving me £50, he's giving me £60. Thank you, comrade. So who else is going to help us? Who else is going to find some of this lovely folding money that pays for socialism, that pays to support the Palestinians, that will help us build the movement, that will bring Palestinian freedom and a Corbyn government? Because that's why we're here. We're here for the Palestinians and we're here for ourselves, because we need a Corbyn government, and a Corbyn government can only be achieved if we fight away these false slurs of anti-Semitism. Because fighting Israeli apartheid is not anti-Semitic. It's freedom for them and it's freedom for us. I'm beginning to get a pile. Okay, I'm told I don't have to shout. You'll give me money whether I shout or not.
No more than 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes.
I'm finding it difficult to hold on to all this money, which is a wonderful feeling. Thank you. Oh, it encourages them. Let's see. Well, I've got some friends with some buckets, and of course what Ian Paisley used to say was a silent collection was the best collection, but I'm not Ian Paisley, so I'll take the coins, I'll take anything. And if you... Well, yeah, so I'm going to send the buckets round now, so you can put them round. Oh, I've got more here. Yeah, I've got people with buckets somewhere. It's a terrible job doing the counting tonight.
Mike, you've got to speed up there. You want to
Okay.
continue with the meeting?
Right, so we can continue past the bucket. Oh, well, I'm going to say that. If you want to join JVL, I've been asked to tell you, there are cards at the back, leaflets at the back which tell you how to join. Because the more members we have, the stronger we'll be. Thank you very much indeed. Give yourself a round of applause for being so generous.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike. Okay. And thank you for the chair also. I'm Naomi Idrisi, just sitting in for Jenny for a few minutes. Okay. Jenny, as I can see her heading back here, couple of things to say. Okay, can we settle down? We're going to start the second part of the meeting now. Okay. So we will in a few minutes have a chance to raise questions. Yes? Apparently this mic's easier. One point that people might be concerned about is that, hello, the meeting is taking place here. Hello. I used to be a school teacher. I'll have to come round and put on a very cross face in a minute. Okay. We hope to conclude the meeting in time for those of you who wish to head off to another venue, I can't remember where it is, for the Palestine Solidarity Campaign meeting, which also has a strong lineup of speakers. Okay, are we ready to start the next part of the meeting? Yeah. Yes. Okay, I think we're going to have to send our stewards round to get you all to sit down and shush, okay? Can we have a bit of quiet, please? Because people will want to raise questions about what Graham and Ilan and Haneen have said. And I'm quite surprised why people are so noisy. Yeah. Okay.
Could people, please, who want to stay in the meeting, take the vacant seats? And can we try and settle down, please? Because we still have a lot of people in the room and we would like to have a discussion now.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, right, everybody, so everybody who
Those
wants
at
to
the back,
participate, please move
Could
forward.
you come forward and sit down, please, if you're staying? If not, please leave.
I will. Yeah.
Right, no, you can come back.
Okay. Yes, so could everybody sit down who's staying? Sorry? Could everybody sit down? We're still moving around a lot.
I appreciate it.
We're still moving a lot. We're going to start the discussion in about 5 minutes. Before that, we got you and then Richard first. Yeah, we've got two announcements first. The first one is Richard.
Hi, can I just want to make an announcement? There is a book on sale, Bad News for Labour. It is a study of how the anti-Semitism issue over the last 3 years has played out, and the reality is it is bad news for Labour. It's an important book to read. It is going to be launched tomorrow at Waterston's bookshop in Brighton if Waterston's withstands the threats that it has been receiving. Even the publication of a book questioning the reality or trying to describe the issue of anti-Semitism and how it plays out is now regarded as fair game for suppression. We will next be having book burning. Can I urge all of you to support Waterston's tomorrow and to buy this book? Pluto Press came here with a huge pile of them. I'm not sure they have any more left to sell, but they will take orders, and you can buy the book through the JVL web at a special offer price of £10 and have it sent to you at home. I don't... Fantastic. Right. Can I urge you to turn up at Waterstones tomorrow, 7:30, in solidarity with their commitment not to be browbeaten into censoring a book in Britain in 2019. And that is what some people are trying to do. We have got to support the right to free speech, the right to debate difficult and controversial issues. And I urge you all to buy and read the book, and if you can, go to Waterstones tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Now, how do I hold this back? Yes, I'll just hold it. How do I hold it? Okay, I've got one more announcement. By a wonderful coincidence, we have just published a document on our website and sent out a press release on what's really been happening in Liverpool Riverside. And here is Naomi to announce it, our media officer, to give us a bit of detail about the press release.
Yes, hi everybody. Not too much detail because we want to get on with the discussion, of course, but some of us have been working for about a year and a half to look at what was really going on in the constituency headed by the wonderful Dame Louise Ellman, MP, who has spent that time painting our party in the most nefarious light as full of vile anti-Semites. Ilan referred to the Jewish Chronicle story, which suggested that there was anti-Semitism going to be going on at some of the fringe meetings. Absolutely astonishing that Louise Ellman was the main instigator of that story. And what she said was, the groups like ours and the Haldane Society of Socialist Lawyers, among others, were going to display blatant anti-Semitism at our meetings. And she named several others as well. So interesting that she should be saying that at the same time that we publish an outline of the way she, in her constituency, has been hounding Jewish members, among others of course, but Jewish members who dissent from her unquestioning support for the Israeli state and who are hostile to her opposition to Jeremy Corbyn's socialist internationalism. So that has gone out on the JVL website. You can look it up there. We've put out a press release, and I think it should not sink without trace, like everything else we've said over the last 3 years, where, as the book that Richard recommended explains, there is no alternative narrative allowed. We're hoping that this one might just break through a little bit. I also want to point out that there are leaflets at the back there about the film Witch Hunt, which many of you will have already seen. Jackie has a starring role in it, but I think that we'll all agree the main point about it is it explains the history and the trajectory of the whole attacks on Labour, the attacks on the left in Labour for being anti-Semitic, for being supportive of Palestine, and for wanting to transform society for the many, not the few, to coin a phrase. So I'm not going to go on any longer, but I do hope that you will take those leaflets, because you can take them back to your organisations and you can encourage people to spend 60 minutes watching a damn good film that will help them understand what we're all confronting. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you. Have the two people who need microphones got microphones? Certainly one. Okay, and we've got half an hour. I wanted to say that I felt bad stopping you to speak, because this is not a political speech. This was a speech about injustice suffered by someone. It doesn't fall into the normal speeches where we say, very interesting, did it? It was stunning. But we have about half an hour, and who would like to go first? Gentleman, 2 or 3 rows back. And maybe you'd like to take a note.
Hello,
Yeah.
can you hear me? Yeah. My name's Norman Thomas. I'm the chair for my pains of the local Labour Party in South Thanet in Kent. Now, South Thanet in Kent isn't very famous except for 1 or 2 things. One thing is that we have Margate, which is the home of Dreamland and the Turner Centre. The other thing is that Nigel Farage has tried many times to become MP for this area because they see it as natural hunting ground. I was very interested to hear what Haneen was saying, connecting the rise of fascism and racism across Europe with Israel. Now, in South Thanet, we have very strong experience of that because many of the people who are now in the Labour Party in South Thanet cut their teeth fighting racists and fascists who are supporting Nigel Farage, Jackie Walker being one of them. And also now we have a Tory MP who is a strong supporter of Boris, Craig McKinley. And he basically is getting support from the same racist and fascist people that we've had before.
It's a very good question as well.
Sorry, well, this is the question.
Okay, thank you.
Can you help us? Because now South Thanet is under attack from authorities in the Labour Party. We've lost Jackie Walker because she's been expelled. She was our vice chair. We've now got a candidate that we chose who's now being she's been deselected, in effect. She's had her authorisation withdrawn from the NEC. She's now having to be reselected. We've got to reselect her again. And the party is under sanction. We're not allowed to communicate directly with our members because we've supported the MP that was there. Her main crime was offering support to Jackie Walker. I mean, this is the most bizarre and disgusting situation. We're trying to fight fascists and racists in our area as a Labour Party, and we're under attack from the bureaucrats and right wing of the Labour Party who are trying to muzzle us. Yeah. They're trying to lose us the next election, not support us. It's the most disgusting situation I've ever seen. Can you help us? My question is, can you help us?
Graham and I will need to answer that. It's not one for these two, but I think the answer has to be that as I said last night at the members' meeting for those who were there, the JVL's job is to try and give the Labour Party confidence to start using sense and reason and natural justice and not to panic. But there might be better answers. Anyway, more people. There was a gentleman here.
Thank you. My name is Adam. I am a Labour councillor for Thanet District Council in South Thanet, same CLPs where Norman's come from. Yeah, I'll do that. Thank you. Sorry. I'm proud to come from South Thanet CLP, where Jackie was a great activist in our community, and sadly, they just missed it. Our community missing it. But I want to show my solidarity to the Jewish voice Labour and to the Palestinian people as well. My background, I'm a Kurdish. My country divided after the First World War. I grew up as a child in the Iraq-Iran war. When I went to school, I didn't have the chance to play in a playground. The people grow up in the war, they know what I'm talking about. We had a bag of sand in the windows all the way up to the roof. And the teacher would, when a bomb landed in a school ground, the teacher used to say, "It's only a bomb, let's carry on." We had to run between the bombs to go to the air shelter. So I feel for a child Palestinian when they get killed on the street, the innocent people. I feel for an innocent Israeli and a Jew person. But what people get wrong in the Labour Party, outside the Labour Party, most of us, not against the Jew people, we're against the way the Israeli government treat the Palestinian people. That is a message it needs to go out. That is a message the media need to know. Media used this against Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn, when I got detained by immigration, supported my case, and I was successful to get out of immigration. And now I'm a proud British person. But let's have a Jeremy Corbyn in number 10. Thank you.
These speeches are too good for me to stop, but try to ask questions as well, please. Thank you.
Shoshana Foster. How is the Trump administration affecting the situation in Israel?
Do you want to wait and
Yeah.
We're going to accumulate 3 or 4 questions, but I'm sure we won't forget them. A lady back there with her arm up. There we are.
Thanks to Ilan's book, I'm here today. Brilliant book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. Oh, sorry. A quick question. I might be the only one here, but I feel totally ignorant about the left in Israel. Is there a left in Israel?
I won't just say no. I'll let these people. Somebody further back. Behind you. Sorry.
Who?
Ian, there's somebody behind Leah.
Hello. You did meet me briefly before. It says Leah Levain. I'm really sorry because I had to miss most of the end of Haneen's talk to try and cope with the crowds. And although it's a real shame that older people have left to go and attend the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, I want to say we as the last 2 years, sorry security guys, we probably broke all the health and safety rules. So I'm quite relieved that we're a little thinner on the ground for this part of the meeting. But and I say many people have gone to support the Palestine Solidarity Campaign meeting. But the point I wanted to make, and perhaps this is the question too, and I'm sorry if Haneen you explained it, but I spent 3 months in the South Hebron Hills in the West Bank. I can't believe it's 5 years ago, and witnessed saw many villages that were under 70 to 100% threat of 70 to 100% demolitions. And there are 2 questions. One is what people think about the level of ignorance. I mean, genuine ignorance, like how it's not known, which is why this meeting is about, talk about Palestine, as is the Palestine Solidarity Campaign meeting. But also, I think Haneen was talking a little bit about this. It's sort of expected, not that it's okay, to go on in the West Bank and in Gaza. But my understanding is that what happens to unrecognized villages inside Palestine, and in particular, but not exclusively, the Bedouin in the Negev, is astonishingly similar to what was happening to Bedouin communities, particularly in the South Hebron Hills and the Jordan Valley. Sorry, it's a long question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. It's actually just a very quick comment, but I do really want to make it, and it's in response to, I thought, the fantastic conclusion of Haneen, which is, if we wanted a European state in Israel, why did we stay in Europe? But I think the other thing, and I had this argument, I'm Jewish, my wife isn't, so my kids aren't, and any grandkids that I have probably won't be. They have a right to return to Israel. Palestinians whose grandparents, who are still alive and who are expelled, do not have that same right. And I think if you want some demonstration as to how Zionism is discriminatory and unjust, just look at the inequitous law of return. So I'm sorry it wasn't a question, but it's something I just had to say.
Okay, just get one or 2 more. Any more questions for Jackie?
Thank you about the stuff about Palestine, and I think it's really important that we should be able to speak out about Palestine. And what I'm concerned about is, when are we going to have a press, not just a press, but also our leaders who are going to talk about the fact that books are being banned in Waterstones, that UCL, that's just about to publish a book that I'm involved in with Chomsky, have been attacking UCL because they've got me in it. When are we actually going to be able to get our leaders of the left, to speak out about your right to call them the terrorists who are out there, who are slashing banners, who are harassing cinemas and shops and venues and going in and threatening people. When will that happen? And our movement really needs to actually get itself together on this.
Would you two like to answer the questions addressed to you?
Yeah.
Perhaps you both could, because they were both for both
Yeah,
of you.
for three of us. You want to start? Start?
Yeah.
You start. You need a mic.
Okay. I will be brief now. I will try, since I gave a long speech. How Trump influenced the situation inside Israel. I will just give one important information. Netanyahu, before Trump, prevented a Knesset member from the extreme right wing from suggesting laws regarding annexation of the West Bank or Zone C. He prevented them. He could not, under Obama administration, do anything practical. So he somehow convinced those who are on his right side to pass such a law. He knew that he needs the legitimacy of the United States. It was the only, regarding settlements, annexation, not settlements, because Israel expanded settlements under all the American administrations. Regarding annexation, he needed a green light from the American administration, and he got it just from Trump. And this was not the only reason, but a necessary reason to his declaration that I will, in case I win the election, I will annex the settlements, and even not just also the isolated settlements, not just the main settlements. So he waited for that, and he got it. And we must also mention the decision, the American decision to move its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. It gave a green line to Netanyahu, and it also silenced the criticism of those who was their only discourse regarding annexation and settlements. We cannot do that. The Labour Party or those who are in the center, the liberal Zionism, their only argument was not that it is an obstacle for peace, that we as America will criticize us and we will lose the support of the Americans. So now with Trump, they dropped this claim. They cannot use this claim against Netanyahu, and this is why also Gantz supported the declaration of Netanyahu. Is there a left? I thought I answered this. I thought that my speech also tried to answer this question. Is there a left wing in Israel? Saying, what's the meaning of left Zionist? Is there an anti-Zionist inside Israel? Is there?
One.
Inside the Knesset, it never was an anti-Zionist party. Let's say that they cannot compose 2.225, which is the threshold of entering the Knesset. Now it's 3.25. But it never was in the Knesset anti-Zionist party. So this is a statistical answer. That they are less than 2%, 1% of the, and a lot of them leave.
I've got some other questions in this. So yeah, thank you. Ilan, did you want to comment on either of those two?
Yeah, on the two questions I think that were important. One of the Trump administration, just to add to what Haneen said, I think the Trump project is important to understand it, because not because of Trump, but because of what it represents. And what it represents is depoliticization, if one could call it, to depoliticize the Palestine question. It's not a new idea, it's an old idea, but Trump and his team have kind of perfected it. The idea is to talk about the Palestine issue as an economic problem, as a business problem, not as a political anymore. And this is connected to the moving the embassy to Jerusalem, stopping funding for UNRWA, and recognizing Israel's right, so to speak, for unilateral actions in the West Bank. This is also connected to Israeli policies, such as closing the archives to researchers on 1948. It's all part of the same Israeli-American kind of perception that you can wipe out the Palestine question as a political question and turn it into an economic welfare issue to which Israel is willing to contribute, but which will kind of close the book on Palestine as a place where you can discuss in the future rights of return, rights of statehood, rights of sovereignty, right of decolonization. And I think this is a very dangerous attempt to wipe out the Palestinians from history and from the map after the first attempt in 1948 only partly succeeded. And we should be alert of this. Is there a left in Israel? I think Haneen already answered it, but just it's important to note that even those who declare themselves as Zionist leftists in Israel are now their numbers is smaller than the numbers of the Palestinian members of Knesset. I mean, if you take the Democratic camp, which used to be Meretz, and the Labour Party, which used to be the Labour Party, it's not called the Labour Party anymore, even there together have less representatives in the Knesset than the joint list has. And that means that even the Israelis themselves understand that you cannot be a socialist colonialist, you cannot be a liberal colonialist, you cannot be an enlightened ethnic cleanser. You either are supporting these policies or you are against them. And if you are against them, you have to be an anti-Zionist. Yeah. You cannot be on the liberal or leftist margins of that.
And one there, and I'm going to ask one question too, which is more tricky, I think, because it's more, you'll see. Anyway, let's have you all.
Isn't Graham going to answer the questions about the Labour Party?
Graham, Jackie to reply on that.
Hello, can you hear me? Well, the issues raised by the South Thanet 3 are different but connected. Because what we have learned is that you build a movement in struggle. We have, believe it or not, in our little area of East Kent, a left that has learned through courage how to fight the right. And nearly all of these people are in the Labour Party. And so what we have learned is that if we can build a movement, we have at least the chance of resisting the worst bureaucratic excesses of the Labour Party. But the point, just to paraphrase what you said, Ilan, you said you can't be a Zionist and a socialist. You also can't be a socialist and support the witch hunt in the Labour Party. Comrades, this is a lesson for us. As part of that Corbynite movement, we have got our comrades on all bodies of the Labour Party, including the NEC. But let me be blunt. I speak for myself here. I am profoundly disappointed that a number of those comrades who have got into position through a left slate are those also who have supported the expulsion of Jackie, of Ken, of Chris Williamson and others. And if there is a lesson, it's this. We learn through struggle, and in that struggle we will have to learn, and soon, the issue of political differentiation, because I'm sick to death of actually voting in these people and then they turn on us. And we've got to learn that lesson and learn it very quickly.
Okay, there's a question here, and there, and there. Oh, Garda. Oh, okay, we'll get Garda in later.
Hello there, Yuri Smouder for Black Agenda Reports. 3 quick questions. I spoke to Emily Thornberry earlier today, and I asked her if a Corbyn government would support the democratic one-state solution. She said no, they're committed to the two-state solution. And then, why has the Corbyn leadership continued to say that there's an anti-Semitism crisis, we're dealing with it, when we have Al Jazeera, Press TV, Electronic Intifada, which has thoroughly debunked that, and the fact that they are de facto supporting the slanderous allegations amongst Jewish members of the Labour Party that they're anti-Semitic. And can you comment on Bernie Sanders, who rejects the democratic one-state solution and also doesn't support BDS?
Okay, well, in a moment, thank you. Somebody else? Oh, yes.
Hi there. Firstly, as an observation, a lot of my friends are left-wing Jews, and there is absolutely anti-Semitism towards left-wing Jews. I've seen it. They've had their heritage, their history denied. They've been targeted generally by non-Jewish people as well as some Jewish people, and that anti-Semitism is not recognised, and those people definitely feel out in the cold. Secondly, a lot of black, minority ethnic people of colour are naturally anti-colonialist and naturally anti-occupation. And when we speak out, I've kind of always identified as pro-Palestinian, but actually I'm anti-occupation. I'm anti-oppression. I've got no real connection to Palestine for me to be pro-Palestinian. It's the cause, it's anti-occupation. And when we speak out against occupation, especially people of colour, we are singled out and we are vilified in the most horrendous ways. And we face, again, the biggest brunt of this. And I don't feel that the party does enough to protect people of colour. And it seems to be a way of stopping us from engaging politically. It's like, know your place, shut up. So that's left-wing Jews, people of colour, having our voices shut down. And targeted terribly. The other thing is absolutely sort of supporting a one-state solution, because people should be allowed to live side by side with everyone. We are opposed to nation states. We wouldn't allow Britain to be a white-only state, or we wouldn't allow, I would like people, whoever they are, to have safety and security wherever they choose to live. And that should be the world we're promoting, rather than more divisive rhetoric that seems to be deeply ingrained in our politics. So they're just my comments.
I will answer those in a moment. Oh, David's there. Sorry, gentleman there. I was told not to name you.
David Rosenberg from the Jewish Socialist Group. First, a big apology. I had to be back in London this afternoon at the West Ham Man U game, and so unfortunately I've missed. I heard a part of the speech right at the end. But the question about is there a Jewish left in Israel? Is there a Jewish left in Israel? I think, in a way, is partly the wrong question, because many of the best anti-Zionists Jews I've met have once been Zionists, yeah, and people change, people go through processes. I'm in contact with, and I know other people are, with a whole number of human rights activists, Jewish human rights activists within Israel. It seems to me that the more appropriate question is, who are the elements who are against the occupation? Yeah, I'm wondering if that's a sort of a more appropriate question.
One of our friends who's outside the building has asked me to point out, when we leave, we may find that there's a bunch of rather unpleasant extreme Zionists who, some of you may have seen them on the way up here. They are trying to entrap people into making inappropriate remarks or behaving in an inappropriate way and filming. So just be very aware when you leave. Lots of people already have, unfortunately. Don't engage with them at all, okay? And it's the only safe thing to do. It's terrible that we have to behave like that. But it's the Israel advocacy movement, Joseph Cohen and friends.
God.
Yeah, your friends, Jackie.
I'm going to take my prerogative to share. There's one person at the back. Then I want to ask my question. Then we've got 5 minutes to answer them. So somebody right at the back. There's Tony. Sorry, Tony. A quick one, please. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just bringing it down. Who was it? Thank you, comrades. Tony Greenstein. I've got a couple of points. The first is, I mean, Graham concentrated quite rightly on what's happened in Thanet Southwest, but we have to face up to the fact that 25 years ago, the leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, was Secretary of Labour against the witch hunt. Today, Jeremy Corbyn supported the fast-track expulsions. We have a real problem with the leadership of our Labour Party when someone who's on the left is actually in the driving seat of those expulsions, and that applies to Jenny Formby equally. The second thing I wanted to make was in response to what Jenny has said again about when JVL was formed. Some people said they were Zionists, but they supported everything you do. People may well have contradictory ideas inside their head about whether they're Zionists or not, but the people who know what Zionism is are the people who are at the receiving end of Zionism, and that is the Palestinians. Zionism has always been a Jewish supremacist movement. It has never changed. All that has changed is that finally the logic of a Jewish state is now being played out. You can't have a Jewish state with rights for people who are non-Jews.
It's meant to be a question. Okay, we've got a few minutes to answer. My question was partly echoing that, and we haven't got long, so but echoing perhaps the speaker there. We must remember that many Jews flying from persecution went to Palestine. It happened to be Palestine. They had no particular connection. I was telling Haneen that my mother, escaping a pogrom in the 20s, went to Palestine and felt safe. What I'm saying is, when we have this dialogue, we must also remember that, perhaps Ilan, for you, and whether or not those people's descendants have understood the full significance of Zionism, what it did, somehow or other their sentimental, emotional feelings have also got to be, I feel, connected. Okay. Yeah. Well, no, I think it's relevant. Okay. Could we now have Glenn? All right, Glenn, a quick extra point if you wanted to.
Okay, just an illustration of that point. I was the captain of the Jewish boat to Gaza in 2010 after the Mavi Marmara, the only Jewish boat that's ever sailed to protest against the dreadful siege of Gaza. On that boat was Reuven Moscovitch, a Holocaust survivor. He, when he was liberated in 1945, went to Palestine as a humanist Zionist and founded with comrades a socialist humanist kibbutz. And it thrived for quite a long time, but it grew, and when they started, they were actually fed by the Palestinians, because until they got their crops going, they had no food. And it grew until it became a big organisation, and the committee and the whole kibbutz met, and they said, we need more land. And Reuven said, you can't take more land, because all the land around us now belongs to Palestinians and we cannot expand. And they said, we are going to expand because that is what we're going to do, and we're chucking you off. And they chucked him off, and after that he never had a decent job ever. And he actually was a founder of Nev Shalom Wahat Salam, a Jewish and a Palestinian village which still exists in Israel today. But what I want to say by that illustration is that that action of that kibbutz, which took over from him and his comrades, symbolize exactly the trajectory of Zionism, so that the humanist Zionism was eradicated, and what took control and what is now the political dialogue in Israel and has been for many, many decades is political Zionism, and it's exactly what has been described by Ilan and Haneen.
Now, the order of play now, thank you, is Graham for a second, a minute, these two, and then both Garda and Mike want to make a quick statement. Okay.
3 points have been raised. Firstly, on the one two-state solution. I speak for myself. I don't see how it can logically be argued now for a two-state solution. There is no basis for it. And as far as I'm concerned, what we fight for is for Israel-Palestine to be a state of its citizens. And I will never, and I speak for myself, I will never support a Jewish state that gives me a greater right to live there than an ethnically cleansed, dispossessed Palestinian. It is, to use the words, unethical, and as a socialist internationalist, it is impossible to sustain that. Secondly, on anti-Semitism. And I think the comrade made exactly the point. We too are victims of anti-Semitism when we have the Tom Watsons, etc., telling us what we stand for as Jews. How dare he and how dare they? And it isn't just non-Jewish people. How dare Margaret Hodge refer to Jeremy Corbyn as a fucking anti-Semite? How dare she? I think it's outrageous, and people like that have no right to remain in our party. And thirdly, the point that Tony raised on the leadership. Yes, speaking for myself again, I'm often very disappointed. The lesson I learn from that is this. We have to build a movement to put as much pressure on them as the right wing do. The reason these people, our leaders, go in that direction is that all the pressure comes from the establishment, all the pressure comes from the right, and we on the left haven't built a sufficient movement to do so, and that's why the JVL exists. And finally on that point, John McDonnell once said, as soon as Jeremy became the leader of the Labour Party, there will be times, he said, when we are unable to act. In those circumstances, we all have to be leaders. And that is our role, comrades. We all have to be leaders.
Thank you. I will be brief, and I will also apologize. Around 8 o'clock I have to leave you because I'm teaching tomorrow at 9 o'clock in Exeter, which is about 9 hours, no, I'm joking. It's about 4 hours drive from here. Just two remarks. One is about your question, I'll come to the second one, but the one state, two states, and Haneen will talk about it as well. As many of you know, I'm a staunch supporter of the one state solution for many years now, and so on. I do want to remind us that the institutions that today represent the Palestinians, whether this is the PLO or the Palestinian members of Knesset, still adhere to a two-state solution. This is an ongoing debate. I still think that this is not a debate even anymore. It's a kind of a gap between politicians that have to provide responses for tomorrow, really tomorrow and the day after, and activists and scholars who are thinking of the next step because they believe that this program is not working. What we need is a candid dialogue between the two groups, the representatives and the people who are activists, and the academics, and the intellectuals. We used to have it in the Palestinian society. We missed it a bit. And then together, we need it to be a Palestinian decision. The one-state solution cannot come from Brighton. It will have to come from the Palestinian national movement. And someone doesn't like the idea, but there's no other way of doing it. And For us as Jews who live in Israel, it would be much easier to push forward this idea within the Israeli Jewish community and society if it will be the position of the Palestinian liberation movement. And I'm hopeful that it will be one day. As for your question, I'll tell you, I think the best answer is to come back to a correspondence that Martin Buber, the Jewish philosopher, had with Mahatma Gandhi in the 1930s. Buber wanted to recruit Mahatma Gandhi to support the Zionist project. And he was very disappointed that Gandhi refused ever to support the Zionist project. That's why in Israel there isn't a street named after Gandhi, not even a staircase, not even an elevator. He is not mentioned. Gandhi wrote back to Buber. He said, if you came to Palestine as refugees and you wanted to live next to the Palestinians, alongside the Palestinians, if you came as refugees to this society which is hospitable, which can and accept people who are in need and needs a place of survival, then I would have supported you. But I understand, and you wrote it in 1934, but I understand the DNA of your project very well. You want to live instead of the people there, not alongside the people. He understood very well what Patrick Wolf only wrote in 1994, that Zionism was a settler colonial project motivated by the logic of the elimination of the native. If you are a refugee, it doesn't give you the right to eliminate the native. And most of the Jews in Israel do not understand it, do not realize it, and therefore I think it is not a question whether Jews found refuge in mandatory Palestine. It is the pace, the quick pace in which they were willing to become from refugees seeking refuge to colonizer seeking exclusivity on the land. Thank you.
I think Israel is most sensitive, not regarding the question of one state or two states. She can argue against the one state, that it is against the self-determination of the Jews. But what is more sensitive and embarrasses Israel is talk about the Israeli practice against any real struggle for democracy inside Israel. And to talk about values of equality and justice, besides talking about the solution, whether two state or one state. And even if we are talking about one state, it is not because one is better than two. It is because the vision of the two states is a vision that one of these two states can be a Jewish state. We are not against two states because there are two. We are against two states because the disengagement, artificial disengagement between two national groups, and because one of them is defining itself as an exclusive state for the Jews. So talking about values and talking about that whenever there is a real debate about the state for all of its citizens inside Israel, not as a debate, what we are doing as citizens, we said, okay, there is the problem of occupation. Now let's talk about the problem of racism here. Of course, for this debate there would be an implication toward occupation and ending occupation. But to really be informative about the attempt of Israel to define state for all of citizens as a strategic threat. In 2008, and this would be my last sentence, 2008, the Israeli intelligence, the head of the Israeli intelligence, declared that Israel faces three strategic threats: Iran, Hezbollah, and those within Israel who struggle for a state for all of its citizens. So these kind of declarations, the honesty of Israel, to use the honesty of Israel, to use this declaration in order to show anyone that Israel declared itself as an apartheid within the internal discourse is so different than the external discourse. To expose, to give information for the people, not regarding what Israel declared and pretend to be, but regarding really the discourse, which Israel is so honest, saying that democracy is a threat, and we want an unequal state, and also to expand this inequality towards the West Bank.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm not sure what.
Right, can you hear me?
Please introduce yourself, because I haven't yet.
Yeah, look, I'm Ghada Karmi, and I'm a Palestinian member of Finchley and Golders Green CLP. I need only ask you to imagine how that feels. Anyway, that's not what I wanted to talk about. First of all, I want a big thank you to the three excellent speakers tonight, and a bigger thank you, really, to Jewish Voice for Peace. I think, Labour Voice for Peace, and well, it's very similar. Labour Voice for Peace.
Jewish Voice.
Right. You get the idea. You get the idea. No, you get the idea. No, I really wanted to say, Haneen spoke about courage, and I really want to thank you and commend you for your courage in standing up for the rights of the Palestinian people, which of course equals truth, justice, equality, socialism. Thank you very much.
I'm very annoyed with our speakers. I just had very good points to make on Zionism and the one state, and they've both answered them beautifully and taken all my words away from me. So, it's on you. I didn't join the Labour Party to talk about anti-Semitism.
Absolutely.
I did join the Labour Party to talk about Vietnam, I'm that old, and now Palestine. Even more, I joined the Labour Party to talk about education and housing and workers' rights and inequality. It's all along that. Let's just call it socialism for shorthand. And what I resent is that our willingness to talk about socialism and what this country needs is continually deflected by Watson, by Mann, by Berger, by Ellman, who insist on every time we talk about something positive, they say, and they're anti-Semites. And the BBC and the Guardian and the rest of them jump on it and silence the talk about building a socialist future for this country. And that's why I'm in Jewish Voice for Labour. But what can you do? I know what I can do. I can get back to my emails. But, you know, one thing, to remember is all this talk about anti-Semitism has damaged the Labour Party, but it's not damaging it anymore. They've done their damage. People who will be convinced have been convinced. But the more they go on, the more some of those people think, what is going on? And people are drifting away from that discourse. That's the bad news. The good news is it hasn't diminished support in this country for Palestine. Every time I go on the streets, in a street demonstration about Palestine, the support is there, and they haven't damaged our support for Palestine, because Palestinian rights are fundamental to our rights. Going back to anti-Semitism, on the table at the back, we have a very good leaflet about what is anti-Semitic activity, because it's anti-Semitic activity that we need to confront, not this. It's like a war on terrorism, a war on anti-Semitism. It's not a thing, but activity, speech, we need to identify that. There's a very good leaflet there, which I hope you will pick up. And if you want to know more, we have a really good education program. We will come to your constituency, we'll come to your trade union branch, and we won't tell you what to think, unlike some others. We'll try to help you think through these difficult issues so you can work out how you stand for yourself. We have leaflets at the back. We have badges at the back you can buy. But please, if you're not already a member, you can join Jewish Voice for Labour. If you're a Labour Party member, if you're Jewish, you join as a full member. If you're not Jewish, you join as a solidarity member, which means we respect everything about you except you can't vote. But I don't think we've ever had a vote yet, so it's a distinction without a difference. And please go back and get your CLP, your Labour Party branch, your trade union branch, to join the growing numbers that have affiliated to Jewish Voice for Labour. Our affiliates are a great strength to us in demonstrating that the mass of the Labour Party members is not anti-Semitic. They support Jews who support human rights. Thank you.
Is that? Thank you very much, everybody. Jackie? Yeah.
Don't forget the people outside trying to spare you.